The storm came with the evening, heavy and loud, rolling across the wide fields surrounding Hartley Manor. Rain struck the tall windows of the library so hard that the glass shook in its frames. Thunder echoed in the distance, deep and restless, as if the sky itself carried a troubled heart. Eleanor Ashford sat quietly in her usual chair near the corner of the room. It was a chair she had occupied almost every evening for 9 long years. Her sewing lay untouched in her lap. Her eyes were fixed on the man seated near the fire, though she knew better than to let him notice. Lord William Hartley sat by the marble hearth, a book open in his hands. The firelight danced across his face, casting warm shadows along his sharp jaw and thoughtful brow. A trace of silver had begun to show at his temples, marks of time she had noticed long before he ever did. He turned a page calmly, unaware that someone in the room knew him better than anyone else alive. Eleanor had stopped counting how long she had loved him, but sometimes the number returned to her uninvited. 9 years, 9 months. More than 17 days beyond that. She no longer counted the hours. They hurt too much. She knew everything about him. The way his shoulders tightened when a letter brought bad news, the small crease between his brows when he read serious books, the steady rhythm of his breathing when he fell asleep in that very chair on cold winter nights when she would slip out quietly so she would not disturb him. She knew the curve of his mouth, the shape of his hands, the sound of his footsteps in the hall. What she did not know was what it felt like to be seen by him. She had perfected the art of being invisible. She moved through his life like a soft shadow, arranging his days with care. His meals were always ready. His letters always sorted, his world always in order. She loved him deeply, fully, and silently, asking for nothing in return. But something had changed. 3 nights earlier, during another storm much like this one, Eleanor had finally admitted the truth to herself. She could not go on like this. Loving him from the shadows was slowly breaking her heart. Being so close to everything she wanted, yet never touching it, had become unbearable. She would leave at the end of summer. The decision sat heavy in her chest, cold, firm, necessary. 2 months remained. 2 months to memorize everything. The sound of his voice, the way he sat, the way the firelight touched his face. Then she would disappear from Hartley Manor just as quietly as she had lived within it. 9 years earlier, Eleanor had arrived at Hartley Manor on a cool October afternoon. The trees had been bright with fall colors, their leaves burning red and gold before winter claimed them. She had arrived with 1 trunk, a few letters of reference, and a heart full of fear. Her father had died in debt. The life she once knew had vanished overnight. She had been forced to seek work, and Hartley Manor had offered her a position as companion to Lady Catherine Hartley, Lord William's elderly aunt. Lady Catherine lived in the east wing of the house and needed someone to read to her, write letters, and keep her company. Eleanor had been nervous as she answered questions in the morning room, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Then the door had opened. Lord William Hartley entered the room, and Eleanor's world had shifted. He was handsome, yes, but it was not only that. There was something deeply lonely about him, something guarded. His gray eyes held distance, as though he stood apart from the world even while standing within it. He greeted his aunt politely. When introduced to Eleanor, he bowed once, formal and brief. His eyes passed over her without pause, as if she were a piece of furniture. And yet, Eleanor had seen something more. Pain. Control. Walls built high around something wounded and fragile. "You will find my nephew reserved," Lady Catherine had said gently after he left. Eleanor had nodded, her heart already in danger. Now, 9 years later, Eleanor sat at the small desk in her modest room. A letter lay before her, written with careful words and steady lines. She read it once more. She was resigning. Her hand trembled slightly as she signed her name. When she finished, something inside her chest loosened painfully. It felt like both an ending and a beginning. The days continued as they always had. Each morning, Eleanor arrived before Lord William. She arranged his letters, made sure his coffee was hot and black, just the way he liked it. She poured his tea without him looking up. He never did. She sat by the window afterward, close enough to serve, far enough to remain proper. She watched him through lowered lashes as he ate, composed and distant. His voice was cool and controlled when speaking of estate matters. He treated everyone the same. It should have comforted her knowing his distance was not personal. Somehow, it only made her love him more. One afternoon in the library, their hands reached for the same book at the same time. Their fingers brushed for a single second. Eleanor felt it everywhere. William stepped back immediately and murmured an apology. His face showed nothing. He took another book and walked away. Lady Catherine was the one who finally explained him. One afternoon, while Eleanor read aloud, Lady Catherine set aside her embroidery and spoke quietly. She told Eleanor about William's broken engagement years ago. How he had loved deeply once. How the woman he planned to marry had left him for a richer man. Something in him closed after that, Lady Catherine said softly. Eleanor understood then. His distance was not cruelty, it was survival. But understanding did not ease her pain. When Lady Catherine fell suddenly ill one night, Eleanor stayed by her side without rest. She managed the sick room, sent for the doctor, held the old woman's hand through fever and fear. William came every night. At first, he stood in the doorway. On the third night, he sat across from Eleanor. For the first time, she saw fear on his face. "You have been tireless," he said quietly. "I am grateful." Later, when Lady Catherine slept, he asked her what her plans were. Eleanor's heart tightened. "I have been considering a change," she said carefully. His hands clenched on the chair arms, though his face remained controlled. Lady Catherine recovered slowly. When summer came, Eleanor knew the time had arrived. One morning, she placed her resignation letter beside William's plate. "I must give you this," she said. He read it. His hands trembled slightly. "I see," he said, then left the room abruptly. Eleanor fled to the rose garden and cried among the blooms. She had hoped, foolishly, that he might ask her to stay. He did not. Later that morning, William stood alone in the house, unsettled. Everywhere he turned, he saw signs of Eleanor. Her book, her shawl, the flowers. She always arranged. For the first time, he felt panic, and somewhere deep within him, something long frozen began to crack. The days that followed Eleanor's resignation moved with a strange heaviness, as though time itself had thickened inside Hartley Manor. Everything remained the same on the surface, yet nothing felt the same beneath it. Eleanor continued her duties with careful grace, speaking little, moving softly, already half gone in her heart. William moved through the house like a restless ghost, his composure strained, his thoughts circling one unbearable truth. She was leaving. He told himself it was only the disruption of routine that unsettled him. Anyone would feel discomfort when a household changed. Eleanor had been efficient, reliable, quietly competent. Of course, her absence would be noticed. Yet each time he formed this explanation, it collapsed under the weight of something deeper. He began seeing her everywhere, not merely her work, but her presence. The way the house seemed to breathe differently when she was near, the calm that settled over rooms she entered, the small order she brought without ever announcing herself. He found himself lingering in places he had never lingered before. One afternoon, he entered the library at the exact hour Eleanor usually sat there alone. He pretended to search for a book on estate management and left with a volume of poetry instead. Another morning, he appeared in the breakfast room, claiming the study was too dark, though it was not. He sat across from her, awkward and silent, unable to meet her eyes for long. Eleanor noticed. Of course, she noticed everything. But she said nothing. In the rose garden one Sunday morning, he found her among the blooms. She wore a simple dress and carried pruning shears in her gloved hand. When she looked up and saw him, she froze for just a moment before inclining her head politely. "The roses are especially fine this year," he said. "Yes, my lord," she replied. "They are." They stood there in silence while bees hummed and the sun warmed the stone paths. William felt words pressing against his chest, desperate to escape. He asked if she was certain about leaving. "Yes," she said gently. "Where would she go?" he asked. "Hampshire," she answered. "To serve another family." The word far echoed painfully in his mind. He wished she would ask him something. Wished she would give him permission to speak. But Eleanor had already learned how dangerous hope could be. The weeks narrowed. 3 remained. Then 2. Lady Catherine watched everything. One gray afternoon, she summoned William to her sitting room. He entered reluctantly, already sensing what awaited him. "You are about to make a terrible mistake," she said without greeting. William stiffened. He tried to deny it, but the words rang hollow. "I have watched that girl love you for 9 years," Lady Catherine continued. "And I have watched you refuse to see her. Now that she is leaving, you wander this house like a man haunted. Yet still you say nothing." Her words struck with sharp precision. "You are afraid," she said. "Afraid of loving. Afraid of losing. Afraid of living." William felt exposed, stripped of every defense. "If you let her go," Lady Catherine said softly, "you will regret it every day of your life." She told him plainly that Eleanor loved him, that she always had, that William loved her too, whether he admitted it or not. "You have 2 weeks," she said. "Choose." William left her room shaken. The rain began to fall as he walked the grounds, soaking his coat, cooling his burning thoughts. He no longer denied the truth. He loved Eleanor. He had loved her quietly, slowly, without understanding it. Her presence had become the foundation of his days. The idea of losing her felt like standing on the edge of an empty future. Yet fear held him still. What if he spoke too late? What if she no longer cared? What if he reached for her and found only politeness where love once lived? 7 days remained. Eleanor packed her trunk in small increments. Each folded garment felt like a farewell. Her gray shawl, the book of poetry he had once given her, without comment. A pressed rose hidden in her journal. She walked the grounds each evening, committing every view to memory. The oak tree, the fountain, the long paths she had walked alone in every season. William watched her from windows and doorways, memorizing her as she memorized her leaving. He saw how she touched the bark of trees, how she bent to examine flowers, how her face softened when she thought herself alone. He loved her. 3 days remained. Fear still silenced him. A farewell dinner was held for Eleanor in the servants' hall. Words of praise were spoken. Tears were shed. Eleanor felt seen in a way she never had before. It was both comforting and painful. That night she dined with the family one last time. William barely touched his food. His eyes followed her constantly. Lady Catherine observed him with quiet frustration. When Eleanor rose to leave, William half stood, then sat back down, his hands gripping the table. 3 days, Lady Catherine murmured. William slept poorly that night. The final morning arrived with pale light and the sound of trunks being loaded onto the carriage. Eleanor dressed in the same blue traveling dress she had worn when she first arrived. It felt right. She walked the house one last time. The library. The morning room. The portrait gallery. She stopped before William's chair by the fire and allowed herself one final moment of grief. Then she went to his desk. From her pocket, she removed a single white rose, freshly cut, its thorns carefully removed. She placed it gently at the center of his desk. A farewell, a confession, everything she had never said. She left without looking back. William woke with a sudden sense of panic. Something was wrong. He dressed quickly and went to the library. The rose waited on his desk. Understanding struck him like lightning. He ran. Down the halls. Through the entrance. The carriage stood ready. Then he saw her. Eleanor descended the stairs, composed and pale, her bonnet in her hand. Their eyes met. Something in William shattered. "Wait," he whispered. And for the first time in 9 years, Eleanor stopped. The word held Eleanor in place like a physical force. She stood frozen on the staircase, her hand gripping the banister, her heart pounding so loudly she was certain the entire house could hear it. For a moment, the world seemed suspended between one breath and the next. William moved toward her with none of his usual restraint. The careful control that had defined him for years was gone. His face was pale, his eyes wild with emotion, and in his trembling hand he held the white rose. "Do not leave," he said, his voice breaking. "Please?" Eleanor stared at him in disbelief. This could not be real. Lord William Hartley did not plead. He did not break. And yet here he was, standing beneath her on the staircase, looking at her as though she were the most precious thing he had ever known. "I have been blind," he said quietly, "blind and afraid. And I am so sorry." Tears filled Eleanor's eyes despite her resolve. 9 years of silence pressed between them. 9 years of watching and waiting. Of loving without hope. "I could not stay," she said softly. I was disappearing. William climbed the stairs until they stood face to face. He held out the rose. "You left this," he said, "and I finally understood." His voice trembled as he spoke of his past, of the engagement that had broken him, of the walls he had built to protect himself from pain. He spoke of fear and grief and the terrible mistake of believing distance could keep him safe. "And all this time," he said, "you were there. Steady, kind, loving me when I did not deserve it, loving me when I did not see you." Eleanor's tears fell freely now. "I loved you," she said. "I loved you quietly, completely. But I could not keep breaking my own heart." William reached for her hand. She let him. "I love you," he said. "I love you, Eleanor, and I will spend the rest of my life proving it, if you will let me." The house seemed to hold its breath. Slowly, carefully, Eleanor stepped down the remaining stairs. She stood before him, close enough to see every line of fear and hope in his face. "I am afraid," she said honestly. "So am I," he replied. "But I choose you." She searched his eyes for doubt, for retreat. She found none. Eleanor nodded. William pulled her into his arms, holding her as though she might vanish if he loosened his grip. She rested her head against his chest and felt his heart racing beneath her cheek. For the first time, she was not invisible. Days passed in quiet wonder. The announcement was made. The household rejoiced. Lady Catherine watched with satisfied eyes as the walls she had long despised finally fell. William changed before everyone's eyes. His voice softened, his laughter returned. He reached for Eleanor openly, proudly, as though afraid she might disappear again. They walked the gardens together, spoke of their future, of a wedding in autumn, of a life built not on silence but on truth. Years later, Eleanor stood once more in the library as rain tapped gently against the windows. But now she was Lady Hartley. The room was filled with warmth and children's laughter. The silence that once ruled the house was gone. William entered, older now, softer still. He crossed the room and took her into his arms without a word. "I almost lost you," he said quietly. "But you did not," she replied. "You found the courage to see." On his desk, beneath a glass dome, rested a faded white rose. A reminder that love, once spoken, has the power to change everything.